Hello and welcome. You are listening to the 86 Chord podcast. My name is Zenry, and today with me I have Felza.
Hi, I'm Felza. I translate stuff on the 86 chord.
And Viva.
Hello. Well, I'm just basically present in the 86 chord and talking there a lot.
And then you have me. I'm just the guy who runs the wiki, and today we're going to be talking about 86 as usual.
Since we're going to be talking about impressions of each volume, or at least roughly that, I have to say, being somebody who's currently reading volume 10, really, I feel like it might just make me a little bit more biased towards some of the earlier volumes now.
I mean, yeah.
How do you mean that?
Yeah, I'm also kind of very biased against the early volumes just by the nature of how the story is panned out. But
Yeah, but I'm just thinking because volume 10 so far has been, without talking about any of the details, just on a really broad stroke. I'm gonna spoil roughly what the first 50% of volume 10 is gonna be roughly the structure. It's basically recounting Shin's first year to 2 years of his experience at the front lines. It's gonna be a few highlight moments of points in his life where something important happened to him, and at the end of it, we're probably gonna see Shin become the Undertaker that he is. That's kind of the entire first half of that book, basically. It's a very interesting journey to kind of go through that again.
is it still very disconnected from each other? Like the stories are disconnected, or
Actually, it feels so. I'm going to use that same analogy as I used back in 86 Chord and in Raw Spoilers. It feels like you're going through a photo album, and then there's this period of just older photos, and each photo there's a story, and they're loosely connected of each other by just being oh, this happened 3 months after that photo, and I remember in that photo these things happened, and then 3 months later these things happened, and this was an important
They're
moment.
Interconnected memories, basically, just here and there.
Yeah. And it's kind of cute going through some of that, and it has a very, very full disclosure, I did not read any of the side stories. I basically did not touch any of them.
Interesting.
Not even the Fido one, or
No.
What?
Personally,
What? You go? No. You're gonna read that right now. Seriously.
I will go.
Okay, I'm shocked. Really, I'm shocked here.
It's in volume 10, so I'm probably gonna end up reading it anyways. But
well, it's true. Yeah, it's true.
I don't usually read the side stories mostly because I consume the main book, and I also consume 86 has been a weird case and then an outlier for me. Most light novels, I check up on the next volume of them every once a year, roughly, basically. Once a year or every 2 years, I will check up and see if there's any new volumes, and I'll collect them and then read them at once. And because I always live abroad and I'm moving around a lot, I don't buy physical volumes, and I don't really participate in community as much until 86. So the entire side stories is just I've just come to terms with that. I'll probably never read any of them because I don't have access to them unless I really went looking for it. And most of the time I'm reading these on the plane, so I'm not gonna be looking up I need that side story. So yeah.
I mean, in theory, you can read them all in a day or something. They are very short, and well,
that is true.
Let's say the only one that's really important is the Fighter one, and as you said, it's gonna be in volume 10. The rest is fluff and stuff that's just added, I guess, to the main story in between the main stories of the books. I don't know, some kind of story about a train ride back from the United Kingdom to Giant, for example, or stuff like that. Just small little things. But they're really neat to read. I think they're entertaining. Well, might be worth at least taking a look at it. I mean, Ping translated them, So it might be a good idea to look at them.
Yeah, I'll come around to it
If you
when I
find the
eventually
time.
do.
So,
Yeah, for me, it's always
eventually.
like eventually I'll probably come around to it when I feel like
Yeah,
the
sure.
urge to go through it. But
Uh,
back to that point, like I'm kind of surprised. I think like I feel like Asato probably like reorganized some of these short stories in a way that the beats of it is like really consistent. Like for the first 50% of it, it has this really, really tight story beat. Like it is a
focus.
beginning, middle, end, beginning, middle, end. So it's a really easy read, and like the information kind of registers nicely. And I don't feel like I'm being challenged to like follow or like there's some kind of really intricate thing here. No, it's just very matter of fact that you're going through these story beats, and it's really clean in that sense. But it's not. It's also varied slightly in due to the content, so it's always like it's gonna be in the next middle. Roughly, these type of things might happen, but because you don't know the details, it's still like intriguing. Like, oh, what? Well, in the next time, what might happen? Basically, so that still happens, and that's my entire thought of like Volume 10 so far, and it does color my my lenses for like earlier volumes to be like, well, there's because I'm looking these are the earlier side stories are like we're gonna see all the Republic being evil again, basically. It's all on display again. So it's like, oh, okay, I can see it adds a little bit more flavor and detail to some of the stuff that's in Volume 1. So that's definitely a bonus there.
I guess that also ties into like Volume 11, right, and what's been released so far.
Yep, which is exciting.
Which you can also see on the cover. Yeah? That also goes back to Volume 1 if you want to look at it that way.
Yeah, I
like
will remain
similar design.
Like I will complain continuously about the fact that we got the synopsis before we got the cover. Like I know that like the synopsis is probably easier to write than like producing a cover. That's probably why that it happens that way. But like I really do think that releasing a cover is much first before the synopsis is much more natural.
I think in the end it doesn't really matter. It's like how
Yeah,
many
it
weeks was
doesn't,
it before
yeah.
the cover? I mean, in the end we are still gonna buy it and read it.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? It's mostly for like fans and stuff that are like kind of interacting with this medium that like this becomes a difference because the cover feeling less impactful after the synopsis is like of course that's going to happen because the synopsis when you go look for a book on a site or you're just browsing, you see the cover first and then you go to the synopsis. It's rare that you go the other way around. So it's designed in a way that the cover should be intrigue and the synopsis should be something that supplements and fills in some of the details from that. But if you look at a synopsis first, of course, then when you go back to look at the cover, it's just like, well, no shit. All of the things is just like, oh no shit. It's like this. It's kind of.
Well, I mean, it does make sense for me, at least in this instance, because. Well, like you said, it's like a throwback to Volume 1, and kind of like we are closing the circle on this story arc, basically. With we don't know how it's gonna end for the Republic, but at least we know it's gonna end this time. And and I think the synopsis was way more impactful than the cover, actually, at least for me. Because
I think it should be though. Yeah, that's the thing. Of course. I think it should be. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, at least for me personally, it doesn't really matter if the cover just released a bit later than the synopsis because I'm already intrigued anyway,
and
that's fine, in the end, the people who are going to buy the book are the core readers, basically the people who have been reading it for a long time now, and I think the cover won't be as much of a selling point there because we all know we are going to read it and we actually want to know how this story is going to go. So I guess I'm kind of thankful that we got it so early, basically. and the cover is more like a, I don't know, just a nod to what we already know, and just like a pointer to where it's gonna go, just and the confirmation where basically the main pair also is at the moment.
But I think there's also a counterpoint to that, because when I think Volume 8 released in Japanese, I spoke about how like it was interesting that Theo was like front and center on the cover, and I don't think the synopsis was released yet. So I was very intrigued about Volume 8's cover specifically, with how important Theo is in that volume. So I was excited for
I mean,
that.
it's like I said, it's case by case, but yeah.
Yeah.
I think this time it was all right that it was done this way. And like I said, in Volume 8, it's fine that they do the cover first, so you can wonder what's actually going to happen,
Mm-hmm.
As its pros and cons.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So I'm thinking, I think we can go back and start with just talking about each, like, impressions of each volume, I guess. Just
to as much as we can remember about them, yeah.
Oh yeah, no, please. I have not opened 2 and 3 and 1 in like a while now.
Yeah, I remember Alex talking about some stuff in Volume 3 where I went like, hey, when did that happen? I don't remember at all. Like that thing where Shin chokes himself in the cockpit of the Juggernaut. I'm like, what? That happened? Okay.
It's like, oh, yeah, that totally happened. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, sure.
That was a thing, yeah. I mean, all right. So Volume 1. I guess I'll go first then with the Volume 1. It was for first things. When I started reading, there were already 4 volumes out, I believe, and 4 to 5 volumes, I believe. And then I bought Volume 1 after I was like, I'm done with all the other light novels I have with me, and I'm looking for something new to read because I have another upcoming 26-hour flight and I need some books with me. So under that circumstance, I looked online. So like, what are some good light novels that are like trending or is performing well recently? And I landed on 86 because I saw a Twitter thread somewhere where somebody, a writer, was sharing their preferences for light novels, and that's why I picked up the first volume of 86. The initial impressions I had of this volume was very much, the cover is very interesting. Because at that point in time, most of the light novels I've read, be it Sword Art Online, be it Rakudai, be it Mondaiji, and the plethora of other light novels, excluding the Monogatari series, because those are slightly different in how they're constructed. But a lot of these light novels have like a very standard style of like cover. It's like a character action splash page. There's like a character in the middle of some kind of action. They're striking a pose, and there's vibrant colors, and like they're kind of, usually the characters are, there's at least 1 or 2 characters that's directly looking at the reader, like looking forwards, or like from some kind of angle looking forwards. And my first impression of like 86 Volume 1 was very much that the cover looked really, really different. Like even just out of the page of like 20, light novels, it's just like, oh, this really stands out.
Yeah, even now I don't think there's anything quite like Volume 1's cover.
Yeah.
Sort of like white line, and then you have 2 split backgrounds with 2 characters superimposed on the top.
Yeah, and just kind of like looking across to each other. Like, it's rare to see like it feels like there's an emphasis on like the 2 characters, but I don't feel like it's trying to suggest something with these characters as much as like say any other most other light novel covers. But yeah, that's my initial like impression of Volume 1. And I guess for more detail, like, I mean, I'm not gonna go line by line and talk about like what I think about every bit of Volume 1. So I'm just gonna kind of go with a like a broad stroke impression of just saying that I thought it was fascinating. Like it was fantastic. It was a very, very interesting reading experience. And as someone who really enjoyed Japanese literature outside of just light novels, I definitely felt that feeling that, oh, this is written in a way that's more closer to literature than it is just like light novels. Like it was very strikingly so to me. And that made everything that happened in the book. Despite that, really, volume 1, there's a lot of emotional beats and a lot of moments and a lot of dialogue here and there. But as a whole, despite being like, supposedly there's a lot of things that happened. But in my mind, it always felt like volume 1, there was like not much really in terms of like real character motion and content and stuff, because it's very much we're following one character to just learn about this world, and she's just kind of going through all of this.
Yeah. Well, for me, it was pretty clear that Lena was the character for people to to project on and to see this world basically with their own eyes, and like this new kind of thing that she also discovered when she stepped out of her bubble basically. And well, volume 1 for me is more like preparation for the entire story, like, which is ironic because at first it was supposed to be like this very close thing, this one-shot thing, and still it kind of acts like I sometimes talked about like a gauntlet where the characters had to run through to see who's going to survive and come out on the other side, and then the rest of the story they'll have to figure out what to do with their lives now that they've actually survived, you know. Like, it's like the only volume for me, at least, where you have this feeling of anything can happen, anyone can die, you know. Because
that
of course
true,
the other volumes are of course also they also have impact and meaning and stuff, but you know, you have now this established cast that you're gonna see the stories really unfold. But in volume 1, it's all very new and everything's gonna be shuffled through, and you'll see what's gonna happen in the end. You don't really know, but it's, you know, it's an entirely different feeling. At least it was for me when I was reading it at first. And I don't really have a point of reference to other light novels or stuff like that, like you said. But you read a lot of light novels, and you have a lot of experience with this kind of stuff. But for me, it was a really entertaining story. It was actually after that I actually come to know that a lot of light novels aren't really on that same level of writing, you know. Like a lot of them are really trash, like isekai stuff, and it's like, you know, that's really not that entertaining, at least for me. See it like that.
really...
So I'm kind of glad that I stumbled upon this.
Yeah, I'm just gonna quickly interject before Zoe says anything, but it really is for me that, like, usually light novels are written in a sense that it reads really, really plain. Like, an extreme example would be if you opened up Familiar of Zero. It's a really old light novel, and it's like a smash it in time. Yeah. If you read any of the lines and dialogue in it, it would, when you compare that to 86, it will read like that is written by a 5-year-old, and 86 is written by like a 60-year-old. Like that sort of it's not even like one is bad or good, but in Zero, in Familiar of Zero, the dialogue just reads like you're talking to a friend on your daily basis. That kind of level of dialogue. And yeah, like going from that, reading stuff of like a bit higher level than, a bit more like decorated than that, to going into 86 was just like the kind of imagery that like Asapo kind of puts in my brain is just like, wow. I feel like I'm reading
an actual novel.
Byakuya from like Higashi no Keigo, for example, my favorite authors. Like when he's describing like a fire in Tokyo and like people just dying in like this massive fire. That sort of like dread is also captured in this, and that was really like impactful for me, I think.
Mhm.
All right, well,
Yeah. You also have a very unique perspective on this, at least between us, because you actually read all of the volumes in Japanese. No, you didn't
That is
really
true.
read them in English at all. So you
yeah,
can
that
actually
is true.
tell
Yeah.
you can actually tell us about the complexity of the writing itself and stuff like that, which we don't really have a point of reference for.
Yeah,
All
so I guess in my experience, when I first read 86, I thought it was absolutely like beautiful. Like, I sort of cried first time reading it. It's like, especially the part with Theo. But as time went on, I came to realize that it's too different from the rest of the series, and I started disliking it a little bit.
Mm.
As Viva said, it's kind of like a gauntlet, right? And to have that sort of switch between volume one and the rest of the volumes is kind of, I don't know how to put it. It's setting up false expectations, in my opinion, and that just sort of drives down my opinion of volume one right now. But I still think it's a
Mhm.
very good book. It gets all the emotional beats right, and I think the only part where I say it misses
Mhm.
is combat, which, to be
Mm.
fair, neither does volume two or three hit the combat. So it's mostly just like a growing thing with Asato there.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. A lot of people have this complaint that they're struggling to envision the battle scenes, really, which I think she really got better at. I think, at least for me, the impressions of the battles in Volume 8, for example, were much better,
Yeah.
much more vivid, and I felt more of this dread and this pressing feeling of imminent death, you know, and
Mhm.
how the dynamics of the battles and stuff like that. It really she expanded everything, the complexity of it as time went on.
Yeah, I agree. I think like it almost feels like to me, at least when Core One was airing, specifically on the battles part, I did not remember much from any of the battles in Volume One. Like
Yeah,
personally
same.
speaking, the only thing I remembered the bombardment that Lena called in to kind of help
Yeah.
Shin to get across, like win that fight. But like the entire process of how that fight started, how it ended, like that entire bit is just like a blur. And any of the other fights just did not register that much in my brain.
Yeah,
And I
they were
think,
just too short. They were
But I
too
think it
short.
was also meant to be that way. Like it was
yeah,
written in
that's true.
passing. Like there was a skirmish here and there, and people died, and
Mhm.
life went on regardless. You know, like it was like this monotone everyday thing for them, and
Mhm.
it was like it also had to leave this impression on the reader as well. You know,
Mhm.
to really feel how they felt about it. Maybe at
Yeah.
least could be one interpretation here.
I think that's fair, and also especially with like the limited length of Volume One itself,
Oh yeah,
it can't
that's
really
true.
expand on as much. But I think like
Yeah.
I'll go into this when we get to Volume Eight because I'm gonna gush so hard about that volume, just because I love that single volume so much. But
Yeah.
I think for now we can move on to Volume Two, or should we just do two and three together? Just because more
It's
than
one story
volume
arc, no?
Yeah, even
Yeah.
more than 5 and 6 is even more like tied together, literally, because of the way the story is told.
Wasn't there talk about how she actually meant to write them as one volume, but it was just too long, and so they split it or something?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
that
think
probably
that was
was the
like it.
case.
Yeah.
It does seem like Asato has a problem with writing too much.
Yeah, but even then, ironically, I think her style of writing, at least in the books, is very focused and very streamlined. There's nothing that's really left on the side, and everything has their place and their meaning, I think.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
All
kind
right.
of get that feeling as well with like Volume 8, right? With all the lore with the Leviathans, but
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Let's get into Volume 2 and 3 then. And how about who here remembers the most from Volume 2 and 3?
I do. I've reread them recently.
Okay. All right, Zenri, go ahead. You go first, since.
First thing, first impressions was I read Volume 2 right after Volume 1, and I disliked it. I think it was just way too much of a departure from the tone of Volume 1, and it also ended off on that giant cliffhanger that I had to wait for Volume 3. But now that I've reread them together, I can say that I sort of enjoy Volume 2 more than I do 3. Because Volume 2, there's just so much emotional complexity with Shin's character, and there's even with that whole timeline jump thing, it's just way more interesting, I think, than the whole Morpho battle, which again ties back into how I don't think Asato really did well with the combat scenes in the early volumes.
Yeah, I think I can agree on the combat part there, because Volume 3 has one of the scenes where it really took me out of it, and thinking, wait a minute, how did they survive that? That wasn't really possible, and they still came out of it and still survived it somehow. Like it was, like I said, it was a departure from this feeling of imminent death, and anything can happen, you know. Where in Volume 1 they just died when if something happened to them, and here it was like, oh, this actually survived. How did they do that? I don't know, but they still did somehow. No. But I gotta say, I still enjoyed the volumes very much, despite reading the epilogue of Volume 1, going blind into it, which I kind of regret now. But still, it was entertaining enough for me, at least, because it was like the world building arcs, so to speak. We expanded away from the Republic, and yeah, it's like you got to see that there's a whole world out there, and not just this tiny little bubble inside a big giant wall, you know. And like you start to like see glimpses of what the Legion actually is, and which then, well, later on we know exactly what they are, but still it was like an interesting progression, as well as surprising that we did a main character switch, so to speak, from Lena to Shin. I think a lot of people didn't like that. Personally, I didn't mind it as much, but I can see where people are coming from. Like you said, it was a bit of a misleading act there, I'd say. But still, I think it's a very fine like story arc as a whole, especially if you didn't have to wait for the second part to come out, like you said you did, which must have been really, really horrible.
Yeah, it's like Volume 2 and 3 is like a very necessary story arc, right? But it's one that isn't the best of the entire series.
Yeah, it's like I said, it was like the basis for what's to come, and where the story is gonna focus on.
Yeah,
it's like this is actually where the series like started to take shape in terms of what it wants to tell, like this unique spin on of soldiers that got taken everything from them, and then somehow still survived, and got to figure out, what are we gonna do with our lives, you know, like so many soldiers have to do with live with survivor's guilt, and somehow try to construct a new version of themselves to be able to live in society, you know, which I found really, really interesting, and that's why I also continue to read the series, because it was like unique in that way, which I have never really read before.
I think I will offer my very limited perspective on Volume 2 and 3, because I don't remember that much from it. But I do remember one thing that definitely helped me get through 2 and 3 and ended up enjoying it more than most initially would, I think. And that is because I am a fan of mecha in general. I am a big fan of the Gundam series. I'm fans of super robots and whatnot. And if there's one thing that Volume 2 gives me that Volume 1 doesn't, is more interesting mechs to kind of like cling on to, kind of look at, because the Juggernaut is an absolutely not amazing, fun unit to kind of like see in a story. It is, as Asato says, it is a pile of trash, basically.
It's a functional death trap, is what it is.
Yeah, it's specifically what she says about it is that like she likes the idea of like pilots having to pilot something that is an incomplete piece of tech, of like a machinery, basically. And that's very much what Juggernaut is. But also the problem of the Juggernaut is because of that, and while that makes it interesting to write like, oh, how can we like make it survive combat and like do these things, there is a very, very hard upper limit to what you can do with it. And like a hard
Which
limit
is
to
what makes it so interesting.
Yeah, but
at
the same time, it's just like I kind of want to see more, because as did Volume 1 kind of dip into a lot of times, that it is obvious that the machines are holding the soldiers back. So once personally, when I started giving a lot of more not really shits, but like I started getting into the character, especially because I read Volume 1's epilogue, and I'm just like, oh, cool, sounds good. Guess I'm going on. Like I'm excited to see how they get to that point where they meet, basically. And for me, it was like, all right, well, if that's the case, it would be nice if there was like a machine that can, like a tool that matches its user, so that I can see these characters pulling up the things they can best do, basically. And the Regenleif is, first of all, it is an absolutely beautiful machine. The white on it and like the way the claw arms work is just like really cool from like a robot standpoint. And the fact that Aso doesn't shy away from using close combat, like close quarter, like she managed to work in like close quarter weapons like blades and like pile drivers into this compact robot that is still feels really functional, is really cool. I don't know if it's I4's idea mostly or it's Asato's idea mostly, but either way, it is a really cool idea. And I think that combined with the fact that, you know, Shin gets to really push this machine and then onwards, and also seeing like the Von Argant and also the Morpho was just like, it made the volumes more interesting for me because there was more things to kind of like keep me like, oh, I'm excited to see what that thing is. How does the combat with that like read it like? Beyond just like, oh, there's also really good character drama and like the interesting intrigue that's going on in the background. But first and foremost, I'm just like, holy shit, I get to see like more of the combat side, while in Volume 1 there was like a lot less of that feeling, basically, because every combat is just like they barely survived, is basically how you can sum it up. So
well, Shin would have died in like every instance if someone didn't come to help him, so that's pretty accurate, I guess.
Yeah, actually, that is something that overall I think 86 does really well, though. Like it maintains the fact that these people survive because they work as a team. No matter how good Shin is alone, he cannot match up against the Morpho alone. He also cannot match up against like a large army of like legions alone. He always needs help, and that's kind of like something that's hard to balance, because I'm pretty sure like there are times where Aso's just like, well, it'll be easier if I could just write him going haywire, you know?
I mean, he goes haywire a lot of the time, but
Yeah, somebody has to like
he
save his ass.
he can only do that because of other people, and
Yeah.
at the end gets bailed out by them, like Lena at least twice with the artillery bombardments and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Yeah, just go back through the books and see how he fared against all the enemies, and you'll see, without other people, he would have died at the end. It's really like that. Like, but we'll come to that later.
Yeah.
All right. Does that sum up Volume 2 and 3 then?
I mean, I guess like
let me think.
like add a bit to like the mecha thing, right? Yeah, I think the mecha variety is great, but I just want to see more from the Vanagant, which is why I'm excited for Volume 9, and then that Giad spin-off as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting perspective-wise because I'm really not that interested in all the mech parts. I'm more interested in the character parts of the story, which makes this story so fascinating because it's got a little bit of everything for everyone, and why the fan base is so diverse in interest. It's like
Yeah.
it adds a bit of complexity to a story where like similar stories might like not branch out as much and not try to tell more facets of a story, like emotional complexity and stuff like that in other stories might really not be your focus of. Like I've read stories where the people act like animal robots and like far away from common sense. Well, action is good, okay, yeah, but they're not acting and talking like normal people. And here, a lot of the time, I feel like these actual persons, like there's an actual person behind this talk, and how they act and stuff like that. It's like you can really feel it and really feel with the persons as well in how they act. At least it's for me. I don't know how it's for you.
Yeah. I think that's fair enough for me personally. Yeah.
I agree with.
All right. In that case, we can move on to volume 4 then.
Oh yeah, the slice of life volume, very very light story. Yeah, really
Oh,
nice. Yeah.
Oh yeah, so I guess that was like we're done with like the sort of prologue phase of 86, right? Where it's now we're getting into like the strike package era.
Yeah, that's like the main story now. Yeah, that's true.
And I think like with that, volume 4 is also when Asato kind of figures out what the structure of each volume is going to feel like. Because like volume 1, there's a lot of talking, a lot of like scenery, dialogue, and all of that, but like very, very little vivid combat. And in volume 2 and 3, you almost could split it to be like there's practically a whole volume of just like really intense fighting, and then a whole volume of just there's a lot of like conversations, story arcs, and that sort. And then volume 4 is when she's like, all right, what if I just she's found the golden ratio to kind of like roughly the golden ratio. She's getting close to it, where there's like there's a good amount of combat, there's a good amount of like world building.
But you gotta also be careful that you're not getting repetitive. I mean, you can try to balance it out, and that's all well and good. But if you start being repetitive, that's really not a thing you should do. Which I heard several complaints about that. That like as time goes on, it kind of feels samey in terms of story structure and how it's like developed.
I don't really feel that, to be honest. But
no. Well, for me personally, I don't really feel it as well, but I find it interesting to see that some people reacted like that. So maybe there's some truth there, but I haven't really thought about it to actually, or didn't really analyze the structure and how everything's built to actually say if it really is like that. Maybe the listeners can tell us what they think. I don't know.
All right, so who is most familiar with Volume 4?
I don't know. I'm very familiar with the first chapter of Volume 4 because it's so fucking hilarious and fucking great. But yeah, I mean, it's. I think the tone of how it starts is very much a departure of how it was before. Like this very light. I don't know. It's very light and very very funny and really heartfelt, and you just sit there smiling the whole time because it feels like it was so deserved for them to actually get to live through this and live together like this. And I don't know, it's after all this hardship, yeah, that's one point of Asato's writing which I love so much. Everything feels earned and not really like handed to them. It's really nice. And yeah, volume 4, we go back to the Republic there. We see how the Republic fares after the complete destruction of the large scale offensive, and it's devastating. Yeah.
So I think I can give a little bit of perspective on Volume 4 since it is part of the package of 4 books that I basically read it in a day or two, really really quickly because the book really got me. So for me, there wasn't as much of like a break between the volumes to even be like, oh, this is supposed to be a lighthearted volume. No, I just went in, just like, all right, here we go.
Yeah.
My health was like, we keep going, I guess. And
yeah, no, it's the same for me. I read everything like up to volume 7 in one go, so it wasn't really there wasn't really a break for me to reflect on and stuff like that. But in hindsight, it makes sense, and she also mentions that kind of stuff in the afterwards as well, with how it's supposed to be like. I don't know. At first, she thought it should be lighthearted or whatnot, but then it kind of goes another way, if you want to say it like that.
I will just quickly drop the one thing I remember the most from Volume 4. Well, there's a few things, but really just quickly. One, the Republic and the existence of the Bleachers was an immediate point where I'm just like, oh, well, that's interesting, because that explores the idea of like the type of racism that's being explored in 86 is kind of slowly expanding, and I'm interested in seeing them going down this path, because it makes it more interesting at the very least. And then the second thing,
we're going to see more of that.
Yeah, and the second thing that was very interesting to me personally was the phonics. I think that's
phonics.
Yeah, the phonics. It is. So the reason why it's so that excites me is because it's one of the few small and light mechs, and it is obviously created, especially with the first scene that it shows up. I still remember that scene. It's a really vivid piece of text. Like when the first group that gets absolutely destroyed by the phonics.
I remember that.
Yeah, reading that was like, ooh, okay, that's, it sends a bit of chills up my spine, be like, ooh, okay, that's dangerous. And the fact that it is a close range terror is also, once again, something like, oh, this goes against everything that like the 86 has trained to face. So it's an actually interesting like opponent, because the 86 are very much trained to be like, oh, we're gonna, round it up, knock him down. It's team effort, multiple on one larger, usually stronger unit like the Verve and such, and the Morpho. So it's interesting seeing this unit coming in as like an absolute threat, and how that ends, basically.
Yeah, I think the nature of this close quarters area in this city underground is really this claustrophobic feeling that it gives is really interesting. It adds a bit of horror to the whole thing, like when Annette gets trapped down there and tries to escape and finds all this body horror there, where the Legion are experimenting on people and how to really mass produce new types of Legion like that. I thought like, oh, are we in Silent Hill right now or Resident Evil or some shit? That was really interesting. Like, skipping right straight into another genre there.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's
a very suffocating pace.
Yeah,
like you just have reveal after reveal after reveal. So you have like the annihilation of Phalanx, and then you have Annette being captured, and then you have that the scene with the human brains and stuff, and and then you have the lasers that come out of the ground, and then you have the Phoenix. It's very suffocating, but it's the kind of suffocating that's it fits what Asato was trying to go for with the whole labyrinth thing.
Yeah, it doesn't let you catch your breath. It's very dense and very very intense in how it goes about. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's also the first first instance of seeing the Zelena. I think I don't know how she's actually called.
Zelene. So it's Zelene, but so it's like Zelene or something would be good enough, I think.
Well, I would say it's Zelena, but that's just my way of saying it. You'd have to ask Asato how it's supposed to sound like. I don't know. Yeah, well, we have like I said, we have the first. It's like the first time we see the Phoenix and its frightening capabilities and how it almost kills Shin. I mean, yet again, he has to trash his Jug to actually somehow survive. Not even, I don't know if you want to call it win. It's more like almost like a like a draw where his rig is completely incapacitated, and he somehow manages to stop it. Actually, and that really lets you see how it's not something that is killed easily. It's very resilient, and how it's gonna return at least once. Not it actually returns twice. I think Phoenix is last when it's in volume 6, I think. No, I'm not sure. I think it is. Yeah.
Well, that specific Phoenix, yeah.
That one Phoenix.
Yeah, that specific one, yeah, the prototype, so to speak. Yeah.
Would that be it for Volume 4? Do you think? Personally, I don't really have that much more to say about it because it does, as much as it's important, and it sets up the whole intrigue with like Volume 5 and 6, and it does like the little mystery thing with the whole Celine subplot. It kind of sets up an expectation for the next 2 volumes a little bit. Be like, oh, there's something interesting going on here.
I think it also sets up the traitor plotline, right? The traitor, or
right.
Being
it starts planting all these like little bits of seeds that become things down the line. But
firstly that, but also like on a character level, it's also the first time that Shin and Lena actually clash on the world reviews as well. Like you have this very optimistic, well, I wouldn't say optimistic, well, hopeful view of Lena against a more pragmatic and, well, also not, I wouldn't really call it pessimistic, but like realistic worldview.
I'm arguing like Shin, I think, is more hopeful in this case because of how he views the whole like bloody Reina being too pragmatic with it.
I don't know. I wouldn't say that. I would say Shin, like, he's very dismissive and very like he thinks he knows how the world works because of the experience he went through, and refuses really to see her way of seeing things. He isn't really open-minded about that stuff, and I wouldn't call it hopeful in that sense. At least not for me. At least not in this point in time, how he is there.
Yeah, hopeful's not the right word for it.
It is interesting to see Shin like voice his displeasure of something of just like something as kind of mundane as just somebody's aesthetics.
It's certainly a step forward. Yes, before he wouldn't say anything.
he was very much a character. Like he always struck me as somebody who's just like, oh, you're wearing a different clothes, whatever. He probably has an opinion of it, but he won't say it. That's kind of the kind of person he is.
Very much him, yeah. This whatever, like he just takes things as they are and doesn't really question them, and just he's done with the world basically at that point, and so he doesn't really has this open mind to really try to understand other worldviews in that sense, which is also why he's so confused about how Lena is thinking about things and how she's trying to like get him out of this hole, And this is like the start of this like 3-volume span confrontation of this problem, really, where they talk about it several times. But we'll get there. We'll see that.
Yeah, I think overall, Volume 4 for me at least was a good time, despite all the horrifying shit and whatnot. Because
we didn't really talk about the mountain of corpses. Yes.
Yeah. Well, for me, that kind of just like maybe it's because I rushed through. Like I kind of rushed all the way through from 1, 2, 3, and 4. It felt kind of like par for course. I was kind of half expecting it, so it was just like, oh, okay, makes sense. And like the whole like since we know brain harvesting is a thing, or the whole lab down there was just like makes sense. So
I mean, it's the corpse mountain is not a meme for nothing. Huh? They're like in every volume you have this corpse mountain in some way or another. But I mean, I think this is one of the instances where it's gonna be much more horrifying when you actually see it, like in anime.
Yeah.
It's like there are instances in the books where I wasn't really touched or anything like maybe it was supposed to, but then in the anime I was like, oh my god, like this has a much different feeling from what I remember when I read it. You know, there's a much bigger impact, a different impact at least. And I think this is one of those instances where I'm also actually kind of curious how they're gonna pull it off without like getting a mature rating. This is gonna be really hard to pull off because it is so graphic and so in your face, and it's supposed to be, you know, because it's so it's like this very basic and raw horror, like that you can't really escape. I don't know. It's hard to explain for me.
All right. Well, anything more we want to add for Volume 4? Or
I'm not sure. Do we want to make a cut here because we're going on 1 hour now? When we have at least 4 more volumes to talk about, it's going to be going at more than 1.5 hours at least.
Sure, we can maybe do like another hour tomorrow at the same time.
Yeah. Maybe.
That sounds good.
Then we talk about the second half of the English translation, something like that.
Yeah.
Might be the best. So we can
sounds good.
reflect a bit on it. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Kind of like split it up into 2 episodes if you want to, like part 1 and part 2 or something like that.
Sounds good to me.